This episode was produced and mixed by Nicola Clausen and Mylan Tatusis, with additional administrative and production support from Daryl Lucero and Peyton Jackson. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, and share. You could find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Radical Narrative Podcast. If you wish to contact us, our website is www.radicalnarrative.com. Welcome back to another episode of Radical Narrative. I am your host, Mylan Tatusis, coming at you from Treaty 6 territory, rural Saskatchewan, out in the middle of nowhere, rural prairie. This is where I'm living, this is where I'm functioning, this is where I'm recording from. Today, I'm really excited to bring you this episode where I sat down with Diane Lam. She is the owner, creator, and operator of a new Saskatoon favorite called Diane's Place. It is a restaurant that cooks home-cooked, vegan, vegetarian, Vietnamese food. What's unique about Diane's Place is it exists in her home kitchen and online only. You have to go online and put your order in during the week, and on Saturday, she's going to have some amazing Vietnamese food ready for you for pickup. What's unique about Diane Lam and Diane's Place is it has a really cool brand where basically she's embodying anti-oppression and anti-racism in everything she does. And if you don't like her posts, don't get her food. She openly says it. It was really cool to sit down and have this conversation with her. So listen in as we talk about this unique brand and kitchen model that she's utilizing now to get her food out there. The Asian hate that has most likely always existed on the prairie and is just coming to the surface in recent months. And ultimately, what the heck's going on in settler families out there? Stay tuned and listen in. Okay, perfect. Cool. So, yeah, Diane, I never met you. We haven't met because of pandemic times, but I heard a lot about you. I heard a lot about what's going on in your kitchen, and then we found each other on social media. So I'm liking your posts. I'm liking the commentary that you're providing. So let's have a conversation today and get this podcast rolling and get it out there for our audience to listen to.
Thanks so much, Marlon. Thanks for having me on here.
No
So I'm Diane. I live in Saskatoon, Treaty 6 territory. I run Diane's Place on Instagram, and I love food. I love feeding people. I love trying to create a community, and I love telling racists they're wrong.
I like it.
Yeah, just excited to be part of this.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to have you, and you definitely love food, and you definitely love the discourse. A lot of good critical commentary coming out of your social media, and we're going to talk about that later. But one of the key things why we have you on this episode is because of the food, first and foremost. You have a very unique model going on, a unique kitchen pickup model, and it's called Diane's Place, and not to be confused with the other place, which is still pretty
Diane's
good.
Kitchen, which is also great.
Yeah, which is also great. But you have a unique kitchen pickup model in the COVID times, and I want to jump into that conversation first and foremost.
Yeah, so I honestly wouldn't have been doing this or wouldn't get the chance to do this if there wasn't a pandemic. Like before the pandemic, I don't know. I had a lot of brunches and suppers and barbecues, and I had people over all the time. And most of my socializing is just having people over and feeding them. And for like months and months, I had people over every weekend for brunch at my house until it was illegal. And I don't know, I just had this like innate need to feed my friends and show love through my food. Probably because that's how my family has shown me love throughout my life. So it's like kind of my love language. But yeah, after I wasn't able to have friends over for brunches and suppers anymore, I started cooking just so much and dropping food off for people. And for like months, I was cooking something new like every day. And I was posting these meals onto my Facebook page. Just every week, I'd post a bunch of meals onto my Facebook page. And after a couple months, my friend Carolyn Doy, she messaged me And she was like, why don't you sell your food? Sell it to your friends. Do test kitchen. And I was like, you know, I was so flattered that she said that, but I also had just zero faith in myself. So, because like, you know, extreme home cook. I've never cooked in a commercial kitchen or anything like that. And I've worked in the restaurants as servers, never as cook. I don't have any kind of professional experience or anything like that. So it was just, so then I eventually put up a poll on my Instagram story, and I was like, y'all want it? And some people were into it.
Awesome.
I couldn't believe it, but
yeah.
It was people who've like never even eaten my food, and they were wanting to pay me money to try it. It just, I don't know, it just blew my mind. Yeah. And then I remember telling my parents, and they were both so hesitant, but also super impressed, because they were like, these people have never eaten your food. I was like, I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're my teachers. They're the reason I cook so much, or like,
wow,
am decent at it.
Yeah. Well, it looks amazing. Like the food's amazing. So what I'm seeing on Diane's place on the Instagram is Vietnamese food. And then there's a lot of, I think you even had like a commentary about uncle's recipe or somebody's recipe that you were cooking before. So it's kind of cool how to see. Yeah. It's like so cool how to see there's this like family dynamic and definitely like home cooked Vietnamese meal dynamic on your Instagram. And it looks really good. The food looks amazing.
Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, it helps. I don't know, because my parents became vegetarians later in life, so they kind of had to redo all these recipes.
Oh, wow.
And so by the time that they were doing that, I was old enough then to be interested in cooking. So it was cool to be around when they came up with these new recipes, and now that I can share them. And yeah, it just feels really good.
That's cool. That's amazing. I want to ask a question about the type of food then. For our audience who's not familiar with Vietnamese, Saskatoon has like a big Vietnamese community and a lot of Vietnamese restaurants. Like I think one of my earliest memories of eating out in a restaurant in Saskatoon was it being Vietnamese food. So it's present in Saskatoon. We have a lot of options. But for those who aren't familiar, what type of food are you cooking? If you give us some context for that.
So like Vietnamese food, there's just so many different types of food, but most of what I cook is like, I don't sell anything like soups or noodle soups or anything like that. So most of my stuff is like noodle bowls, rice bowls, stuff that doesn't need broth, and vegetarian and vegan versions of it. So yeah, noodle bowls, rice bowls, and then sometimes I'll have like specials like crepes and pancakes, something like that, or spring or cold rolls. So it's all over the place. It's a lot of, I would say a lot of flavor. And I think because there's no meat in it, my parents put, I guess they put extra thought into the flavor profiles of every dish.
Yeah.
So like the noodle bowls, the shredded bee, which is traditionally made with just shredded pig skin, and then they mix it with rice powder. Like my parents replaced it with vermicelli, and there's taro in there, there's jicama, there's sweet potato and fried potato. So instead of just the shredded pig skin. So I feel like everything that they've come up with in place of the traditional food is really thoughtful, and yeah, just really thoughtful food, I feel.
Yeah, it totally is. It totally is.
Too confident, but it's because my parents came up with a lot of these recipes, so I feel confident to boast about them.
Yeah. It totally is unique because I mean, like for me as an Indigenous person on the prairie, obviously our traditional diet was impacted, and there's a lot of commentary and discourse around reclaiming that. But for me growing up, we were always exposed to like multiple foods from different cultures. And it was like it was so flavorful to experience these foods out on the prairie in Saskatchewan. And no offense to like Ukrainians or settlers coming from Europe, but there's a different flavor profile that is obviously measurable when you eat foods that are coming from another part of the world.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
There's just spices that like, yeah, there's just spices that other ethnic groups or other people of color use that are just not even on the radar.
Yeah.
Of white people.
Yeah, it totally is. And then it's that's why like I love food on the prairie. I mean, I traveled for college, so I like had the privilege to be in like Victoria and the United States and Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I got to travel, and obviously I traveled with my palate, right? Because we're always finding places to eat, holes in the wall. Always in California, San Francisco, so big Asian community in San Francisco.
Yes.
So it was like I was really exposed to a lot of flavors, and then when I moved home to start my PhD, it was kind of like, okay, I need to find these places. I need to find these places, and yeah, we've been searching, and we're always open to anything that's sort of unfolding on the prairie in real time, where it's bringing the flavor out here. And it looks like you're doing that, like the kitchen's doing that, and I'm super excited to try it. And yeah.
I'm glad you think that. I hope so. It's our authentic.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard because I feel like I'm bringing something authentic, but then it's kind of like maybe hard for me to say it's authentic because it's not even made with real meat. It's not what these traditional recipes are. I don't know. So sometimes I feel like I don't know that I can say it's authentic Vietnamese food, but it is to me.
Yeah.
It's what I know from my family, passed on from my family, and
yeah, it totally is
authentic to our experience living in Canada too.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree entirely, 100%. I mean, it's your commentary for sure, but it's like when I'm hearing you talking about it, it makes sense, right? Because even like with authenticity, that's sort of like a slippery slope, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like who's defining that and things like that. And yeah, so for me, it definitely is. And yeah, it's just a cool process to see because at the same time, you started Diane's Place and it's not like a regular restaurant, right? So there's like a unique process here. So how did the process look for you to start up this restaurant that's obviously exists on social media and it's basically out of your home kitchen? What was the process of starting that like?
It was weird. Like it just felt, the whole time I was doing it, I just felt like week by week, I'm like, I don't know if it's going to work. And every week I do the same thing, yet I still feel like, I don't know if this is going to work. So it felt like for the beginning of it, I was kind of just winging it because I was just like, okay, I'm just going to make something that I love to eat and I'm going to sell that. And then after that, it became like, I started out selling one dish every Saturday. And then every other week was spring rolls and not actual meals. So just really, really low key, and I guess felt overwhelmed because I was so inexperienced, and also felt like, oh, what am I doing? I am selling food out of my home. I have no experience. I don't really know that many people. Yeah, I just felt, I guess, I don't know, I felt kind of silly doing it because I was out here like making posts and promoting my food, but at the same time, like, is this legit? Like, I feel, it just felt, I guess the imposter syndrome settled in because I just felt like, what am I doing? What is this? But it really blew up in a way, just that people here have become so supportive, and I'm really thankful for that because if they weren't, I wouldn't be able to keep doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. Any surprises along the way? Anything that stands out to you that just sort of, sealed the deal in terms of starting it?
Like the biggest shock to me was how down people were. Like, I don't even give cutlery, like I just, like the whole thing started with me being like, hey, pick up the food and you can go home and eat it. And yeah.
Yeah, that's cool though. Like, it's cool that you're getting this support from the community in Saskatoon. And that you're doing it. Like, it's a cool model to see. And I think like for me and my family, me and my partner, we got tired of cooking like a few months into the pandemic. So
yeah, I think a few people felt that way.
Yeah, so it's like when you see these food options, you're definitely on board with wanting to support them and get your hands on them because it's just like there's definitely a cooking fatigue that took place there for a while.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, for sure. So with the Vietnamese food, some details on the ingredients. So you're doing this sort of like this shift in your family where you said that people went vegan and vegetarian. So the details on the ingredients of the food that you're offering, like the dishes you're offering right now, what type of ingredients go into that, and where are you getting those ingredients from?
Oh, so I use a lot of fresh herbs, fresh Vietnamese herbs. Lemongrass is a big one. MSG, we love MSG. Coconut, we put coconut in everything, and taro. I feel like I feel like every time I come up with a new dish, I'm like, there's coconut in this one too.
Yeah, cool.
So Southern Vietnamese food is a little bit like sweet, so everything has kind of like a sweetness to it, and I think that sometimes throw people off if they only like savory food.
Yeah. So South Vietnamese food, and then what about like in terms of ingredients? Is there a specific place you go and get your ingredients to make these dishes?
I get all of my ingredients pretty much from the Ang Ang market. So shout out to Ang Ang and the uncle that works there. He is a gem. He's so freaking awesome and has really helped me out and just has been really, he's just really hooked me up. And I can always count on him for like fresh herbs, for the rest of the stuff like lettuce or whatever. I just get that at the wholesale club. But most of my stuff comes from Ang Ang market or the 8th Street China market. Those two are my go-tos for sure. The noodles are all from Ang Ang. Yeah, Ang Ang's great. He's awesome.
Awesome. I'll have to put that in the show notes so people could go check it out.
Yeah, they have food there too. They have a little cooler of pre-made food. So yeah, nice. Check it out for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I'm gonna get some of these food questions out of the way since we're talking about it before we move on to some of the social and political commentary. But what's the favorite dish you have that you offer that you could speak to? My
favorite dish to eat is the coconut noodle bowl. I mean, that's just, it was my first dish that everyone loved, and I feel like that's like my signature dish also. But I'm most proud, but that's like my parents' recipe through and through. Like they taught me how to make that, and I didn't even know that was. I thought that was something that only our family ate. But anyway, it's a solid one. I'm proud of that one because my family did a good job on it. My proudest dish is the dry combo noodles. It's got 2 types of noodles. That one I came up with the recipe from top to bottom, so I feel proud of that one.
Nice.
just because of that.
Yeah.
And also because my parents tasted it and they gave me the thumbs up, so that feels good too.
Oh, cool. So can you describe the dish for us, for like listeners who never experienced Vietnamese food? What does this dish look like, and what does it consist of?
So then, so the coconut noodle bowl is thick vermicelli. And then it's got the B, which is like the shredded vegetables and noodles with toasted rice powder. And then you got spring rolls, some fresh herbs, lettuce. And it comes with 2 sauces, our vegan dipping sauce and coconut sauce.
Nice.
So that one's like sweet and salty and tangy and savory. I think it hits all the flavors. A little spicy if you want it to be. And then the other dish, the dry combo noodles, which is hutu miko, is 2 different types of noodles. So there's rice noodles and egg noodles, and it's topped with quail eggs. And we make a vegan sesu using gluten balls, and we use seasoned ground round, so that's a little peppery, and vegan shrimp, just sauteed with some garlic.
Cool. And
then lots of herbs, fried garlic, fried onion, and a sweet soy sauce and some chili garlic sauce. So kind of a lot, but it works.
It works. And yeah, like that, I think that just speaks to the fact of how much flavor is going to be in it, how it's going to be an amazing experience when you eat it.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of it because my parents approved it, so I feel really good about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to ask a question about you also grew up in Yellowknife. So what was it like growing up in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and what are some of the main differences between Yellowknife and Saskatoon aside from being on the literal prairie and Yellowknife being in the north? Because there's a unique family dynamic here I think I want to highlight is that you're obviously your heritage is Vietnamese, right? So what's your family story of like making your way into Diane's place in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan? How did you get here?
Yeah. Okay, so Yellowknife, it was sorry.
No problem.
I'm just thinking about how cold it was. It was cold as hell, just so cold. And I definitely growing up there, I was like, man, F this place. This place is so brutal. And like, what am I doing here? But, the sense of community in Yellowknife was just amazing. And I really missed that community there. Was that there was a small population only of Vietnamese people, but we all knew each other and we kind of could always rely on each other one way or another. For Yellowknife itself, I mean, really, it's not that different than Saskatchewan. It's the tundra, but like there are no trees there either.
Yeah.
And it's just so cold and barren and in the summertime, in the wintertime, the sun goes down like 4:30, 5 o'clock. And yeah, you don't see it until middle of the day next day.
Wow.
But, it's got there's so many beautiful things about it, even though it's so dark and depressing sometimes. Like the Northern Lights there are insane. I've never seen Northern Lights look like that again since I moved down here. In the summer times are also insane because the sun would be out until like 2 a.m. So it's just really beautiful, beautiful summers, even though it lasts only, like 2.5 months or something. Yellowknife is it just feels so strange because it feels like so different than here, but it's not really that different. It's just a little smaller. It's just I don't know, maybe because it was smaller, the sense of community there was stronger. And felt less isolating, less ostracized when I was there.
Oh, interesting. So you described that as like less ostracized. So how would that be like reflective of you living in Saskatoon now?
Oh, I guess just because I had so many Vietnamese friends in my life when I lived there that I never felt like, oh, great, I'm the only Vietnamese person here. I'm the only Asian person here. I was kind of surrounded by it. Not that there were a bunch of Asian people there, but just, our community made it a point to kind of know each other. So it just always felt like I maybe not so alone.
It's interesting you're saying that. So like, I want to sort of just highlight, like, do you feel like a sense of being alone in Saskatchewan or in the prairies?
I do, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because I was so used to having this huge community. Like when I moved down to Saskatoon, my parents knew one family, and like we never really did get to know any other Vietnamese families here. Like they're not like, for example, in Yellowknife, if there was a newcomer Vietnamese family just came over or something like that, like the whole place would rally behind them. Like someone in the community would have a party to welcome that family, and there'd be like karaoke and food and gambling and it was just like so normal and expected. But here it's like you kind of take care of yourself. Unless you know someone, they're probably not going to reach out to you.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting observation for me in general. But I think that also highlights, I think, part of like why your social media does have this political social commentary that is critical, obviously critical of settler colonialism out here, because Saskatchewan, like one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast in particular was we kind of wanted to highlight like the prairie dynamic and just position that in some episodes. And we are, because it's different out here. It's like, we're in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, right? We're definitely not Vancouver. We're not Toronto.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so it's like there's a different type of like isolation, social discourse out here that is really, it's unique, and it's definitely like critiquable.
and it was prevalent even before COVID.
Yeah.
Hey, like, yeah.
Yeah. So since we're talking about this, let's jump into this conversation then. Like, obviously, like I said, one thing that we notice observing your social media is that you're very vocal and even local in terms of just like the politics taking place both globally and locally on both your personal website and even on Diane's Place Instagram, right? So you're even bringing the commentary into like, I guess like in quotations, like the business model, right?
Yeah.
Have you thought about how like your politics shape your business model?
Yes. And it's like very purposeful. Like I do feel like an obligation to speak out because I've never had this sort of platform before. I know it's not even 1,500 followers, but I really only know like 200 in real life, you know?
Wow. Yeah.
And I really believe in like the power of the actual people living these circumstances. And it, you know, it sounds like a lot of people can relate to what I post and share on my story. I just think that like since the beginning, I've made it a point to share anti-oppressive posts, and like it does affect my customer base, but I feel it's purposeful because I'm not like, I don't know. This is yeah, it is part of my livelihood, but it's, you know, it's once a week. It's something that I am passionate about. I'm not trying to just feed anyone. Like I can literally see my follower count go down after I post something anti-oppressive sometimes, you know, but I'm like happy about it because I'm not trying to serve any kind of bigots. And if people disagree with my politics, it just kind of shows that they're privileged or ignorant or sometimes just downright like hateful. So I mean I feel like I'm also able to do it because I don't rely on all of my income to come from it. And so I don't feel the need to have to please every single person that comes across Diane's Place. I mean, obviously if you're going to buy from me, I'm not going to like be shitty to you and hope you don't enjoy my food. But I just mean, you know, it's not for everyone. If you don't, you know, believe what I believe in, then maybe you shouldn't eat my food either.
Yeah, totally. And I think that just like there's just like there's a moral backbone in your work, like in your cooking. There's a moral backbone in your social media profiles that I noticed because when I saw like Diane's Place Instagram sharing stuff, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I like this place already. Because it's not necessarily like, I don't know, like there's sort of like even on the prairie, there's a very almost borderline toxic culture of like patience almost,
positivity,
culture of positivity and respect, and it's like a really thin veneer where you have to be cordial, but then you know like the person on the other side of the table or counter has really toxic racist politics, and like this politeness, this culture of politeness, it really irks me because it's really like a big dynamic out here. So when I saw your business model and I saw you doing what you're doing, I'm like, okay, yes, let's get on the podcast because I like this. Yeah.
Dang, man, thank you so much. I'm glad. Like, I mean, honestly, I'm not posting it being like, I hope this inspires someone. Like, if it does, that's great. But also, I do want people to know that, you know, shit's fucked.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And it can actually reach people. But yeah, I 100% agree with you that like, there's like a hesitant to call people out here. Like people are more worried about their clout and like their social status within Saskatchewan and like within Saskatoon and like the I don't know, the arts and you know, like the cliques here, kind of like the arts and the music and the restaurant industry here. They're like really hesitant to call someone out, especially if they think they have like just a smidge of talent. It's so weird.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because I do see that like even professionally in academia, I see that like in governance, obviously, just in like politics, both on the Indigenous side and I guess on the settler side, where there's this like culture of politeness that isn't really getting to the core of a lot of the issues that we're facing collectively on the prairie.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a sugar coating, right? Like,
yeah. and then we're the ones that
Yeah.
are, and then it's interesting how it also is like we're the ones that are, you know, that the people who critique these or highlight the toxicity and you know, bring light to it, we're the ones that are critiqued as the ones causing problems.
Right? And isn't that crazy? Because yeah, it just blows my mind because we're not even getting paid to do that. We're not getting paid to like stand up for people or like to, you know, like to take a stand or whatever.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of that. So what are some of like the political, social contexts that people who are listening to this podcast who aren't from here, like who are from other parts of the world, need to understand about like Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, or Saskatchewan in general? What are some of the issues that we have here that you are critical of?
Oh God. I think the biggest thing is just how rampant white supremacy is here.
Mm-hmm.
It just like goes unchecked, and it's so casual. It's shocking. Like people here, honestly, like sorry to lump every Saskatoonian together. That's, you know, obviously if the shoe doesn't fit, please don't get mad. But what I always think about when I think about Saskatchewan and its issues is when we had that white privilege post up, that billboard,
Mm-hmm.
and Saskatchewan just lost its shit. They just lost it. They couldn't. It wasn't even anything like, you're a white person, so you're a racist. Like, it wasn't anything close to that. But they can't even do the bare minimum of acknowledgement. So like you know, that it's not even a conversation because they can't even acknowledge it. Just so ignorant and willfully ignorant.
Yeah, it's true. And just to give context, the white privilege billboard was just a billboard, right? It was just put up, and it was simply just like, what was on there again? Was it just the white privilege? Like, did it just say white privilege?
It was literally it was like an older white man literally just saying, I know that I have white privilege and I should use it to uplift other people. Let's bridge the community, something like that.
Yeah.
It was like a positive,
Yeah.
it was like very positive and uplifting, but people were triggered by it.
Yeah, it was, yeah, they were triggered by it. And this was, I think, in 2017, where it was, I think it was branded as specifically an anti-racism billboard. And I think there was like multiple characters, but there was one that specifically said, I have to acknowledge my own privilege and racist attitudes or something, right?
Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
And people lost their shit. Like, people were in an uproar.
Really?
And it was crazy because like the comment sections on Facebook, when something on the prairie goes down, it's like the most volatile, toxic place.
It's actually disgusting. It's a dumpster fire. Like they should be Facebook jailed, to say the least.
Yeah.
Like I just can't. Like in the same breath that they'll say, "Oh, we should." It's okay to murder this person because they're this skin color. In that same line, they'll also be like, white privilege doesn't exist and I'm not racist.
Yeah.
You're racist for calling me racist.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's zero accountability. And like I said, they can't even acknowledge it. So there's no moving forward because they can't even admit to themselves that there is privilege and that racism exists, which is just the basic. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, like so much of that is tied to settler colonialism, right? Because when you look at those profiles and you click who posted that comment, then you're going to see like the farmer iconography or, you know, the hardworking like settler type of dynamic where they're sharing these really cheesy memes or even like the prairie sunset photos.
It's like one person. It's one person just cloned over and over again. Yeah. It's the exact same mindset. It's crazy.
And then, they'll have those weird little like pride little banners on their Facebook profile of something that happens. And maybe there'll be a classic car or something. And it's just like they're the same person. It's like, it's weird, but it's true.
It is. I know it is.
Yeah.
And it's only because we've seen enough.
Yeah.
Like there's been so many and they've just proven themselves to be so. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Here, especially, when I was in Yellowknife, I learned about residential schools when I was in grade 4. Like my husband grew up here. He didn't learn about it until it was on the news. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just a serious disconnect to the, I guess, the truth for the people who live here. They're unaware. They weren't taught it. So then if they hear it from anyone that's not like an authority figure, they're just like, you're a liar. It's not real.
Yeah. Fake news dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure. And then like for our listeners who aren't familiar with Saskatchewan, I mean, in Canada, we do sort of have like this, Saskatchewan does have this label of being like, like the Southern United States with its racism and stuff like that. Yeah. And unfortunately, it is true. There is a lot of racism here. Yeah, it is a dynamic. But at the same time, I mean, like I also want to highlight the fact that your business and your model, your kitchen model is definitely, providing the critical commentary and at the same time offering good food. So obviously, like, we do have these beacons of cool stuff happening out here.
Thank you so much, Malin. When I first started it, my husband was like, "Are you sure, babe? Like, you're not scared you're gonna get straight up hate crimes for posting these, these posts and sharing them and being like, this is my business and this is what I believe in." And I was like, of course I am. Like, of course I am. There's some really, just really, to say the least, unreasonable people out there who would totally go out of their way to make a scene. But I'm like, but the more I posted it, the more support I got. The more people were like, thank you. And the more they were like, I also think this and I also believe this. So I don't know. I think it's worth it. There's more people who are supportive than there are than there are, the antis.
Yeah, true. And then also at the same time, you're doing this. I mean, obviously, we're still in the wake of like the Trump era, where there's been, a lot of that racism and white supremacy made its way across the border. Obviously, we did some podcast episodes that highlight like Alberta as being the dollar store version of America and things like that, where it's just sort of like highlighting this toxicity that's making its way up. And obviously we're in a time where there's also a lot of anti-Asian hate taking place. There's a lot of racism taking place towards the Asian community in the United States and also in Canada. And then, I mean, we are in the wake of, the Atlanta hate crime that took place. Do you believe that anti-Asian rhetoric has affected the way people in Saskatchewan think and act and operate? Because there is this risk of rural settler Saskatchewan or just settler Saskatchewan in general tending to mimic and parrot what takes place in the United States politics.
Yes, 100%. And I don't even think it's like, I don't know. It's like, to me, it's not so much like a rise in anti-Asian rhetoric in Saskatchewan. It's more like there are like a handful of people in Saskatchewan that are like innately racist. They don't think that any person of color deserves their respect. Like maybe before COVID, they didn't really give a fuck about Asians, right? Then they weren't like they loved Asians or anything like that, but they didn't really care for us. Yeah,
it was like they would live over there type thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like that was kind of our survival tactic, was to mind our own. But since COVID has happened, it's given people a reason to, now they can hate on Asians and it's justified. It's just magnified and like it's just blown up now because of Corona and people feeling that that justifies us getting hurt, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's really changed people here. I think it just enables and like justifies their thoughts.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Like maybe they thought these things. I mean, I honestly, just thinking about that guy who, went to Mai's restaurant, Mai's kitchen, and went on that racist tirade, right? When they asked him to wear a mask. Just thinking about that guy, like, I don't think he developed these views just now. I don't think that he just thought now that Asians should go back to China. I think he's always thought that, but now he can say it out loud.
Yeah, totally.
And he feels justified in doing so.
Yeah, and for our listeners who aren't familiar, there was a racist tirade that took place, I think last month, was it? Where two settler dudes went into a restaurant to try and eat, and they weren't wearing masks, and the owners asked them to put on a mask, and he just flipped out, right? He just flipped out and, you know, started like slurring all this racist hate and jargon and got pissed off and left. And that made its way on social media. I remember seeing that, and I was like, this is classic Saskatchewan. Like, this is what,
Right.
yeah, this is like what's always been here. And I agree with you. Like, I agree with your sentiments 100%, is that you're saying that this has always been here, but now there's like a reason for them to bring it to the surface. And I think that's speaking to the dynamic here, and it's really on point.
Yeah, because I like, honestly, the people who suffer the most from racism in Saskatchewan are Indigenous people. Like, it's just it's unparalleled. I don't know. It's not the Oppression Olympics, but like, for me personally, sometimes it feels like I'm kind of dumb for being like, that's not okay, that's so wrong that they freaked out on this Asian person when they didn't need to, when this shit's been happening to other people of color for years and years and years out in public. And who said anything? No one said anything.
Yeah, that's true too. And then also there's this like dynamic in Saskatchewan too, where there's obviously this conversation around class, right? Because people who do make their way or immigrate to Canada tend to, you know, get work. Like, they tend to work and try and get into like that middle class level of society, right?
Yes.
And so there's this tendency to sort of keep your head down and get to work type thing. I really cheesy bad reference here, but I have a Korean friend who brought it to my attention, where he talked about Off of Kim's Convenience. I don't know if you watched that or seen it. Yeah, where
Yes.
Kim Chi says something where like Asians are the new middle class or something, or we're upping ourselves on the privilege thing. And he highlighted that to me, and I was thinking about that because he told me to watch Kim's Convenience from the perspective of colonialism and things like that. And I think I only watched a few episodes. But I think about that because there is this tendency for Indigenous people to sort of just stay on the bottom, because there is this cultural sort of assimilation process that takes place with a lot of immigrants or newcomers that come to Canada, where they like, okay, we gotta show that we're going to be good Canadians and work hard and do what we need to do. And then, oh, look, there's Indigenous people. How do we respond to that? Right. We had a cool episode with Roma Nawaz. She's Pakistani, and she actually lives up in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories now. And she was highlighting that, how she was even witnessing that in the immigration process, where there was this tendency where racism was being sort of brought into the conversations to influence newcomers. So yeah, that was a cool episode. So if our listeners didn't listen to that, they could jump into that one. And yeah, because she kind of unpacks it from that perspective, which is really cool to see.
It's just, there's just so many layers, hey, Marlon. We Asian people have really, like, obviously the model minority, it's a myth. It's not real. It's not actually, we're not actually white people, but we ourselves have bought into it. We've assimilated to it so that we can be adjacent to whiteness.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know, not knowing that it's actually so performative, and that in a second you can just get discarded if you're no longer serving that group of people. Like, if you come over here and everyone's white, everyone in power is white, and they get to call the shots, and you come over here and you're expected to assimilate to this country, and then there's the Indigenous people versus the settler white people. But it's not, the Indigenous people are not the people who have power in their own country, right? The people who come over here are going to want to affiliate more with the people in power to get their approval. And so then it's easy for us to then be like, oh yeah, the white people they're right about the Indigenous people. They're right about Black people. They're right about brown people, you know? It's because then we're like, oh, and we're not like that.
Yeah. And it's a colonial dynamic, right? The result of colonialism and obviously imperialism and just, the state of the world. Lots to unpack there to think about too.
It's really brutal. It's really, really toxic. And they don't even realize, I think a lot of Asian people don't even realize that they fall into that myth themselves and that they buy into it.
Yeah. Like the model minority myth you're highlighting. Yeah, have to be more patriotic than the patriots, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they're like, if I stand up for those people who I actually believe in, or who have gone through similar experience as me, right? If I stand up for them, then the people in power will not like me. I will not be accepted. I'll not succeed.
Yeah, and that's something for a lot of like newcomers and immigrants to think about, right? To start to wrap their head around and think critically about.
Like, I don't know. I don't think they say that out loud, of course, but I think that's maybe a lot of the thought process for newcomers and Asian people here.
Yeah, there's some truth to it, because even my friend Sam, who runs the Southpaw podcast, sort of has this commentary too, where he critiques that from a very critical leftist perspective. That is sort of the dynamic taking place, and he's observed it and experienced it. So yeah, and it's really cool you're talking about it and positioning this too, because I think it's a conversation that more people need to have, right? Especially for me as an Indigenous person. Obviously, this is my traditional territory. I believe in Indigenous nationhood and governance. So it's really cool when newcomers, immigrants have these conversations, because it's like, okay, cool. Now we could, sit down over a good plate of food from Diane's place and have a good conversation about this and start to theorize how, the nationhood.
Something meaningful, yeah.
Yeah, and theorize how, the decolonial framework or the future is going to look, obviously, in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. I hope it's a decolonized future, because this shit ain't working.
Yeah, it definitely isn't. Yeah. I want to ask the question of how can people address Asian hate and racism in Saskatchewan, in our territory?
Yeah. Just honestly, Mylan, just simple things. Like, please, just stop Asian jokes. Just, like, all Asians eat dog, all Asians are good at math, all Asians are bad at driving. Like, come on, right? Like, yeah, it's not funny. It's not, let's leave that back in the 2000s, early 2000s. It's just, it's so toxic. My cousin who's in high school now, he's like a decade younger than me. He's experiencing the same things that I experienced 10 years ago. There's no difference. It's the same jokes.
Yeah.
I just, like, please just call your homie out when he says a racist joke. If he says something that is a little bit fucked up, tell him, Don't just laugh it off. It doesn't matter how small the joke is, right? Because if you say it often enough, you just believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. And to be honest, like my community, Indigenous community, like the Native community falls into that too, where there is these racist jokes around the food and around, Asians eat dog or cat, right?
There are.
Yeah, and it's really toxic.
It's true. It's another strange and like heavy dynamic between the Asian community and Indigenous people here too.
Yeah, but one of the cool things that I always wanted to like do a documentary on or highlight is how Indigenous people in the Americas, in particular United States and Canada, have a really strong affiliation with Asian food, in particular Chinese food. Like,
yes, that's so true.
Yeah, we love it. Like you'll go to like the hole in the wall Chinese restaurant in rural Saskatchewan, and there's gonna be like Indigenous families sitting there eating food. And it's always weird how there's like a Chinese restaurant in the middle of nowhere, right next to like a native reserve in a small little town. And I never understood it. Like I never understood why are people like bashing on Asians when obviously, we want to go and eat at the Chinese restaurant when we're in town.
Yeah, that's so fun. That's the same thing in your life too. My dad worked at a Chinese restaurant up there. Same thing.
And there's also obviously like cultural elements to it. Like one is that they serve the big dishes, right? So you could feed your big family, right? Instead of just doing the individual plates where they bring out all the dishes. So that's one obvious thing. But then also like there's this historical social element where when natives went into town, they weren't not as comfortable eating at settler restaurants as they were at Asian restaurants or Chinese restaurants. So they naturally just gravitated to eating at the Asian restaurant because they were going to get served, right? There's going to be less tension in the room. And so that just sort of like, we have a strong cultural affiliation with Chinese food and just Asian food in general. And in Saskatoon, that translated obviously to like Vietnamese, right? Because there's a lot of Vietnamese restaurants now. So like there's a lot of Crees who could just speak to the Vietnamese dishes and things like that because we grew up eating it. So it's like
I love that.
Yeah, it's so weird to me, like how this racism does, like a lot of Native people are racist, but they're not connecting these social cultural dots to, hey, maybe like in the next 30 years we're gonna have like Chinese and Vietnamese dishes at our feasts because we've been growing up eating it for like the past 30 years, right?
Yeah, that's so funny because growing up, there was a lot of like that kind of mishmash
Hmm.
of indigenous and Asian culture, and like I said, because the community is so tight there, um, like like for example, my dad, if he was going to make a big batch of Vietnamese food, like we know we're delivering it to a few households, but then it's like if they're if they have dry meat or if they just got like a moose that weekend, then we get some too.
Nice.
So I don't know. Even in Yellowknife, I feel there's just kind of like I don't know how to say like a comfort between the two cultures.
Hmm. Yeah, and not to like generalize all Asian cultures, but I mean, just for where a lot of people are at, we have to view things and structure it from the perspective of Asian food and Asian people because there's a lot of nuances here. But yeah, the Chinese food dynamic, Vietnamese food dynamic, it's been really interesting to observe from my critical perspective also.
Just feel there are a lot more parallels though than I think people realize.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I mean, obviously, like the food element is it's like, it's just a part of being human, right? We like to gather around food. We love to share food.
Yes.
And so that just naturally is a draw to people. And obviously, like, Chinese food's been Americanized. So a lot of our people only know the Americanized versions. But I mean, we're getting there to the point of where like now dim sum's a big thing for people.
Yeah.
So it's like we're upping our palates to getting to the point where yeah, we're probably even going to be to the point of where we start learning the language and calling the food in the language, right? The dishes in the language. I'm confident.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just brings like such a, how to say, kinship,
Yeah.
like maybe we can't even really communicate that we got food.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. It's like, the food is like the glue. And like for me, I always traveled with my palate. So I definitely like always just looked for the food. And then usually when you find good food, you find good people who are really like mindful. Because obviously to cook good food, you kind of have to be conscious of like society, right? Where you're going to get your ingredients, where you're going to shop, where your community is. And yeah, again, not to bash like, the Saskatchewan Ukrainian influences because pierogies are awesome too. But I mean,
I love pierogies.
Yeah, there's like, I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, there's like there's these cultural differences I think that we have to acknowledge with just like our palates and the cuisine in general that, we're getting more global and that's a great thing, right? Because I mean, food's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate, I guess, the community that food brings.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really wanted to position that in this podcast episode with you, is position the food. And obviously, that there is an affiliation that my family, my community has with Vietnamese food, but just Asian food in general. But I want to also ask a question because we are talking about anti-Asian hate. We're in a climate of it where, a lot of people aren't having the social political commentary they should be having or the critiques they should be giving. And we're also at a time where like my niece is a big K-pop fan. She loves K-pop. Like her poster, she has like all the posters of like all these K-pop artists and things on her wall. And it's a big influence. Like it's a big influence in society today. So it's like, it's almost ironic how there is this growing anti-Asian hate, but there's also this like growing K-pop culture. And again, it's like, how come people are making these like correlations? Like, you know what I mean? Like, come on, people, let's get a bit more critical here.
I know there is no critical thinking involved though. It's just, they just take what they want and then discard the rest, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
To really pick and choose.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you are a big K-pop fan and obviously rap music, right? Are there any tracks or artists that are on your radar right now? Like how does that like influence your discourse in general and what do you love about it?
Yeah. I used to love K-pop growing up. And then I stopped because I was embarrassed and I didn't want to be like too Asian, and so I like stopped listening to it for like a decade. And then last summer I started listening to BTS again, or just Korean music again, and I just love BTS so much. It's just so good. And I guess pop music, K-pop music in general is very like not very thoughtful, right? It's just like fun and easy and catchy and dancey and all that. And it's like pretty people, good looking moves. And, pop music's pretty, it can be shallow or whatever, but BTS is, they got some really good songs, and they have like a huge, really focused on I guess on the idea of loving yourself and being true to yourself, which is, it's so corny, but it like makes me love myself more listening to them. Be like, it's okay. So yeah, definitely recommend BTS. But my all-time favorite artist is Lucky Day, and he's just this R&B singer, but there's like funk elements in his music. Soul, it's just so good. Classic. Yeah, that's like all I listen to these days. Lucky Day and BTS are my top, just my faves of the world.
Nice.
But they're all really like pro self-love, or like really open about things like supporting people, or I don't know, like they're like down to stand up for issues too. Oh, and I've been listening to a lot of Vietnamese pop lately, and I've always really been into Vietnamese psych rock from like way back then, like pre-75. And my husband was like, I should make a playlist, and then people can listen to it when they're eating Diane's place. But I'm like, I don't know if that's too extra, but I think maybe I'll make a Vietnamese playlist.
Yeah, you definitely should, because I think anything that sort of like opens people up to a global perspective, I fully support. And in general, like, yeah, because I definitely want to give some commentary and position K-pop, because it's so popular. I mean, like, a lot of the native kids too are making their way to K-pop and loving it, right?
They are. So. but I was gonna say, like another thing with Indigenous folks and Asian people is like even with anime, like,
true.
I feel like Native people are into a lot of Asian stuff also. It's not even just food. Like, so many of my friends are into anime and K-pop, and they've always been into it, and they're kind of like, the weeb or whatever. But I just feel like it's relatable for Indigenous people too.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I really wanted to highlight too, right? Because you're definitely on point with saying anime, and then obviously K-pop, but even just like, even like, martial arts that have originated in Asian countries in general too, right? So there's like these correlations here, obvious, that people just aren't highlighting, that people need to highlight and be like, oh yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's just so many parallels.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess honestly, if you put my music on shuffle, it's just all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm similar too, because people always ask me what type of music I listen to, but my playlist is like, if I put it on shuffle, it'd be the exact same way. So it's like, I literally don't know how to answer that question when people ask me. And I dedicate time once in a while to try and think about, okay, what type of music do I listen to? Do I tell people? But I never, I never developed an answer. So I just say, whatever, whatever's good.
Whatever I like.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so you've come a long way, it seems like, with this in this short while of having this goal of wanting to share your food and get your food out there. What has Diane's Place taught you since fulfilling that first order?
I guess it just taught me that people are actually very willing to support you if they, one, if they like your food, but also if you can just be yourself. I guess it's just taught me that I can just be myself and speak my mind.
Cool.
And whoever's down with it is down, and whoever's not, then I don't need to actually worry about it.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that, because I mean that statement you just said gives me hope too, right? Because you got like 1,500 followers on Instagram, which means there's 1,500 people out there that obviously would most likely who more or less support what you're doing, and what you're doing is great work. And me hearing that is like, okay, there's 1,500 people out there who most likely would also support what I'm doing. So it's almost like this little beacon of hope in Saskatoon right now, right? With your restaurant model and the food you're creating and the commentary that you're putting out there. So
it's too kind. Honestly, Marlon, I don't feel like I'm like doing anything. Like, I don't feel like I'm really an activist when I'm because it's really me just sharing posts. And like sometimes I'll write how I feel about the thing, but like really I could be doing more. I'm not really, I don't know how to say it. Like I want that to be a part of me and who I am. So then naturally it's part of my business. But sometimes I also feel like, does this just look good? Like, is this just so performative to just post all this shit all day long? I don't know, but yeah.
I mean, I think just the fact that you're asking that question speaks to the reality that you're navigating this in real time, and that the fact that there's a critical self-assessment there is a really good sign also. Because some people don't have that, right? Some people are just going to be performative with it and, show up for like 4 years and then disappear. And yeah.
Yeah, that's what I don't want to do that, right? Like, I don't want to just do something unmaintainable or like that's just showy and then there's no actual anything to back it up with, you know?
Well, I think like when I first, because what happened, like literally our intern for the month, our intern, Nicola Clausen, was all like,
an angel.
Yeah, who's awesome and has been doing amazing work for us. They told us about Diane's place and I never heard of it. So when I searched for you, I saw that a lot of people were following you that I knew, and I was like, how did this slip under my radar? And I looked at the food and I was like, this food looks bomb. And yeah, basically they said that I should be doing an episode with you, and I was like, you're right. How come we're not? Like, how come it hasn't been on there yet? And so yeah, we got it set up and everything worked out, and that's why we're glad to have you on here.
I'm just so flattered that you think that I have anything worth saying. I just really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, we're really glad to have you on here. So based off everything you're doing now, if you could remove all barriers and constraints, what project would you like to do, if not now or in the future?
I really just want to have my own restaurant, but I just want to make it for people with for free. And then they can just eat my food and enjoy it and not have to worry about paying for it. And then it could be like a community thing where people can help me buy ingredients, and all I have to get paid for is labor, and then I can just make food for people. That would be nice.
Yeah.
It's a small dream.
Yeah, it's a cool dream, because I mean, I think like we could definitely like spend more time probably like on a whole nother podcast talking about the economics and politics of that choice. But it's a cool model. It's a really cool model to think about.
The Riversdale community fridge inspired me. Made me think of that. I just think it's so cool what they're doing.
I have a question here that Nicola put up, and it's specifically about your logo, but I don't think I saw the logo.
Oh, yeah. I had posted like drafts on my personal Instagram, but there's no legit logo yet. I think they're asking because way back when my logo, the idea for my logo was I wanted it to look like a Vietnamese album cover from pre-75. So just like really funky, not perfect looking, colorful logos and hand drawn. So I got my dad to draw some up, and he drew up a few different designs. And then now my husband is taking those designs and digitizing them. And we kind of just chose our favorite font and working on that. So hopefully it'll come next month, which is my 1-year anniversary of Diane's place. And then that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Also, like you made references twice or a few times on this podcast to pre-75. And I want to ask a question, especially for our audience who's not thinking critically about that. What does pre-75 mean when you're making that reference to Vietnam?
Oh, so that's like when the war happened. And so pre-75 is like before the war, and then after that is after the war. And the music, and because my parents fled, they kind of lived their lives comfortably before then, and then had to flee after 75, after the Viet Cong invaded. So then a lot of my interest in childhood, sorry, not childhood, a lot of my interest in the music is like from a particular time. So it's like the music that was made before the war came, because for a while during and after the war, there was kind of like a standstill when it came to like psych rock music. And shortly before the war, there was a period of just like kind of carefreeness of Vietnamese youth. And so there was a lot of really good psych rock.
Cool. Yeah, that's very interesting, like global perspective and historical context there.
It's strange, eh? There's so many factors.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I also want to ask a question specifically about like Stop Asian Hate campaigns, and if you had anything planned or are planning in the future.
Yeah, it's kind of strange just because we were planning an in real life rally, but then the COVID variants are just too out of hand right now. So we're not going to be able to do something in real life. But I've been working with some people, some like strong Asian women in our community. And the plan right now is to kind of have a roundtable discussion, something that other folks can join in and listen in on. And
cool.
We just not really sure how it's going to look like yet or when it's even going to happen. We're just in the works planning it right now. But there is something happening. We are planning something, just something to bring a little bit of comfort, a little bit of healing maybe to our community, some support. I also just wanted to mention that, that anti-Asian rhetoric and what happened in Atlanta and all the lashing out that's been happening in Saskatoon. I had someone from CBC interview me, and they were asking crazy questions. Like, they were like, why hasn't the Asian community here done anything yet? As if it's our problem, as if the onus is on Asian people to fix this issue. I just really want to say that, like, with racism of any kind, it's always going to be on the onus of white people to fix that shit. Like, all we can do for our community is support and be there for each other, but we can't actually dismantle that. There's events happening and getting planned, but we're doing it for our own healing and for our own comfort, not so that we're not doing it because we're going to fix it. Like, we're not really ever going to be able to remove the rhetoric, the anti-Asian hate rhetoric against us, unless white people take reign of,
And it's crazy how they always try to position that, right? Like how they try and position as, fix it yourself type thing. But like we just talked about in this podcast, is Saskatchewan's like a whole structure of settler colonialism and white supremacy.
Exactly.
And and like that was somebody's uncle. Like I always on my social media, I always post when something racist happens. I always say, whose uncle is this? Or whose grandpa is this? Because it's somebody's, right? And they're probably like in the younger community who probably promotes woke culture and things like that. Yeah. But then it's like they're not taking it to the dinner table, right? They're not taking it to these spaces that we've been highlighting in this podcast, where our families like to gather around food and talk story. It's where we learn our politics. Yes. It's where we learn our history. But why isn't that happening over there on the settler side, where this racism is being fostered? So
exactly, yeah. The onus is actually not on us.
It's not, it's definitely not. Yeah, and I always pride myself, and I pride myself with the students I work with when they disrupt their Thanksgiving dinner, or go home for the weekend and like call putting out in the work. Yeah, putting in the work, call out their uncle, because everyone has the racist uncle. That's a whole dynamic that a lot of the young people go through. And I mean, of course, I encourage them to be safe, because obviously, things could turn, yes, potentially volatile, but at the same time, it's like that's the type of stuff we need, where people are being disrupted to the point of where the behavior is ideally stopping, and they're more critical of it, and it's being called out. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. And this commentary of you being anti-oppressive, anti-racist on your social media and in your business model, Diane's place is a real safe space. Like, just having this conversation with you, I feel safe. I feel secure, obviously, as this is hetero dude. But at the same time, we were talking earlier about how, there was an instance in Saskatoon that sort of just highlighted some of the problems that we were talking about here in this podcast. Do you want to go into that a bit and just give our audience, context of sort of how we came to this conversation and why it's important to have?
So since I've been posting just all of my anti-oppressive posts are kind of all over the place. But one thing that was really huge was, the sexual assault allegations within our music industry in Saskatoon and like in our general arts and music scene here. I just wanted to say how awful and sad it was, the amount of women who reached out to me to tell me that, yes, this is true, and also here's my experience. But then there was a handful of white men who then would like send me things being like, oh, have you heard about this guy? He's awful. He did this and he did that. And then like sending me all these things, and they're like, you should speak on this. And I'm like, what the fuck? You're a white man. You should speak on it. Why are you asking me to do it? One guy literally was like, I've been sued. I've gone to court with these guys, so I don't feel safe doing it. And I'm like, and you think I should post it in your name? Like, what are you thinking? Who has real power over here? It's not me. It's just, I just had to bring that up. It was just strange that all these grown ass white men were like asking for my help when like they have not posted anything on their story. You know what I mean?
But that's true. Like what you're saying is true, right? Because there's also like this dynamic where Indigenous people were always like front page and center. And it's always like the worst of like, our experiences, like sexual assault, alcoholism, crime. But the crazy dynamic that I learned, that I become aware of doing the work I'm doing out in rural Saskatchewan and in Saskatoon and having a lot of settler allies and friends, is that there's a lot of toxicity that exists in their family systems. And the big difference is they're not making like the front center page news stories. There's a lot of alcoholism. There's a lot of chaos and trauma, obviously. And it's like, well, how come you guys don't talk about it? How come you're not positioning, these family narratives that need to be positioned? So it makes a lot of sense that like, it's interesting how they're trying to pass you the ball, because again, this culture of politeness, this culture of silence around their family systems, I think is a very real issue that a lot of them face for very real reasons. But at the same time, it's like, it's your family system, man.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like they have this image of like the white picket fence, right? They want the good family, clean cut acreage and farmhouse, but then there's chaos there. And I think like this commentary that we're having right now, I think we need to highlight the fact that address that also, because we can't do that for you.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And it shouldn't be on us. Like I'm not an emotional labor dump. So it's just strange. Like the kind of entitlement that comes with it, where they're like, here's an issue, but I don't want to talk about it. I want you to talk about it, and you should figure it out how to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, we got to get them there. I think I don't know if we need to like bend over backwards to make them confident enough to post stuff, but I mean that's like the bare minimum. Yeah. Like just post. And
I know it is the bare minimum. Exactly. You don't even need to add your own caption.
Yeah, exactly. Just hit share and just watch your family self-destruct. Just kidding.
But actually.
But I mean, it's a thing. Like it's literally a thing where I had students and colleagues who are non-native, non-indigenous, and obviously settler, and they messaged me and they're like, "I'm gonna share this. Should I share this?" And yeah, it's like on the hotness meme scale, it's probably like a 5 out of 10. It's not like it's nothing like it's not a hot take.
It's not even that rank.
Yeah, and then they share it, and they're like, I did it. And I'm like, good job, cool. Now let's see how your family responds. And they're always like, oh, my uncle didn't like that. Or my grandma inboxed me and said, are you feeling okay type thing. And it's like, this is like the bare minimum stuff, people. You got to like get a backbone and confront those family systems that are toxic.
Agreed.
Yeah, but yeah, there's that dynamic. Yeah, there's this, again, I think that falls into like the culture of politeness and that exists out here where people want that white picket fence imagery and they want like,
I agree
the house to look perfect and nice, but nah, I mean, we're humans. There's trauma, there's chaos.
Exactly. Y'all got issues too.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the conversation we're having. I really like it because it's really homegrown commentary for both of us, and we're basically two minorities sort of speaking, and there'll be settlers listening to this and observing the commentary on the side, on the margins. So I think it'll be a really good episode. I'm excited for it.
I really, really appreciated this. Thank you so much again, Mylan. I can't thank you enough.
No, thank you for your time and the food you're making and what you're doing. Any shout outs you want to give?
Yes, please. I have a few. First off, like thank you, Nicola, for like thinking about me and sharing, letting people know. I really appreciate that. And then also my husband, because he is, he's my delivery driver. He's my deep fryer. He's half of Diane's. He's a third of Diane's story.
Nice.
And Mylan, thank you. And also just thank you to all of the businesses in Saskatoon and like all my customers who are so supportive and so ready to be vulnerable with me and share their experiences with me too.
That's so cool. I really appreciate like the work you're doing, the food you're making, because it really does seem like a safe place. And I'm looking forward to getting my food there this weekend.
I really do want it to be a safe place for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wish you the best with this project and hope it carries on into the future. And that you nourish many more people in Saskatoon and the world.
Thank you so much, Mylan.
No problem.
It was great talking to you. So great.
Yeah, no worries. And then, yeah, I'll definitely put in my order and then I'll be there to pick it up this weekend.
Sounds good. I'll meet you for real this weekend.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay, great. Thanks for your time and everything.
Thanks again. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.